Hello, dear participants of this wonderful and exciting talk with Mark Travis tonight. Here you get the video play out from us so that you can watch the talk again because we talk really quickly, so you might want to have a look inside. And I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed it and that I plan another talk with Mark. And also I had the idea of making a workshop with the title, Everything Starts with Your Own Story. And I'm so excited about this. And if you are interested in finally grabbing your own story and using it for yourself or for a business or for life, then I will be very happy to keep you informed. So have fun with the video play out. Okay, Mark, if you hear me, please join us here on the webinar.
I am here.
Great.
I am here. Thank you.
Did you hear me all the time?
I hear you fine. Yes. And it's wonderful to see so many. We're up to 85 people already.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is very exciting.
Yeah. And especially because we only, it's so wonderful that so many people were interested because we only posted it a week ago. We only had the idea because, you know, I have a little IGTV channel where I talk every Thursday with storytellers and directors and actors. And I had this wonderful talk with Mark. And then we said, oh, it was such a wonderful talk. We have to talk longer and we have to make it bigger and more accessible to a lot of people. So this is how this idea was born. So do you want to say something? Yep. Because there are a lot of people that know you and
yes, I mean, I think this is exciting. And first of all, Kathrin, I want to thank you for doing this. And you're right, this has sort of been born out of not only what we did a few weeks ago, but born out of the talking we've been doing for over a year, you and I, about this process. We have a lot of talks. And I'm very excited that you're doing this and very excited. And I'm thrilled to see, although it goes by very quickly on the chat, but that's okay, to see so many friends showing up here. People say, hey, Mark, good to see you, things like that. And I go, this is, anyway, it's good to, well, the thing is, as Kathrin said, I can't see any of you. I see Kathrin, and that's it, but that's okay. So I want to welcome you all to this chat. It's really going to be a conversation. And you're welcome to the conversation. And I'm going to encourage all of you, because somehow we will save the chat to anything you want to write in the chat, write in the chat. I love reading the chat later after it's all over. So if you want to put something in there or a personal thing to me in there, just put it in there. I'll look at it. I may even get back to you, but do that. Please be in touch, even though we can't see you and even though you're not talking with us. Yeah, that's it.
I planned that we could see everybody, but then we would only have been like very tiny in a big frame. So that's why I decided we do it this way. But I really, normally I love watching people's faces and seeing them. But now we see you through your messages.
Yes.
Okay, Mark. So
yes.
Some of you know this, but I think most of them do not know this. I had the idea for this talk because last year was a magic year for me besides the corona. And of course it was tough too, but it had some really magic aspects. And one of the magic aspects was that I met Mark and I started to work with him. And I'm a director for 20 years now. And of course, I had been busy with storytelling all the time. But in Germany, we don't do so much personal storytelling. And as I went to the United States a lot, I came across personal storytelling a lot in business and everywhere, and autobiography. And I thought that's so exciting. And I always wanted to do that. So and then I was thinking of booking a storytelling class with you in LA, which would have been very expensive to fly over just for 3 days. And then Corona happened and I thought, okay, that's it. I'm not going to meet him this year. We're not going to talk. And 2 weeks later, you wrote that you're going to do this online. And that was when I came in and we started work. And what happened to me was, while we were working, I started to write an autobiographical book about, which is called My Lovely Shame. And it's about the 10 or 12 most embarrassing and shameful things in my life that have been haunting me so much that they have stopped me from doing things. And Mark encouraged me to dive deep into these things, and we will come back to this later. But so it was all about shame, all layers of shame and embarrassment that we started to get to know each other. Okay, so Mark, because they are mostly directors tonight, but not only.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are lawyers also and teachers. And when we talk about storytelling, what exactly do you mean? What do you understand under this word? Because this word is so big and it means marketing and corporate world and film and script and everything. What is storytelling for you?
Wow, it's a big question. I know this is everything we're talking about today is storytelling. And my life as a writer, actor, director has been a long journey with storytelling. And it wasn't until many, many years ago I realized I am a storyteller. I used to say, oh, I'm a director, I'm a writer, I'm an actor. And I realized, no, I'm really a storyteller. And what I do direct, I do write, I do act, I still do all those things. That's just a part of the storytelling process. So I think a lot of us, when you said there are a lot of directors here and there are hopefully actors, I know there are some because I've seen them in the chat, and writers here, but even as you mentioned, Kathrin, the lawyers or non-professional, people who are not in quote, that business, the business that we're all in, those people, you're all storytellers. Now think about this. What is a story? Story is just telling a story. Storytelling is just telling a story. Do you realize you can probably not get through an entire day, any one of you, without telling a story? You get up in the morning and someone asks, how was your day so far? You're telling a story. Where do you want to go? What do you want? You are telling stories all day. So think about this. Stories on a very basic level are how we connect. It's how we control or try to manipulate or try to design how we're going to be seen and how we want to connect with somebody else, how we want to communicate with someone else. Yes, we use stories for entertainment. That's the film and television business. But we also use stories to inform. We use stories to investigate. We use stories to explore. We use stories all day long. Everybody uses stories all the time. Watch, if you have the stomach for it, watch the politicians. They're using story all the time to try to convince you of something or persuade you. Stories are very, very powerful. So it's come to the point where I think about storytelling. And I've said this to Kathrin and some other people. Storytelling is like breathing. It's like food. We need it, but it's like breathing. We don't think about it. We don't think, oh, I think I'll tell a story. Suddenly we're telling a story, or suddenly we're listening to a story. So storytelling is a very important, constant fabric of our lives every day. But now we get to what we're talking about here today is we're studying storytelling. There are those of us, writers, directors, actors, and a lot of other people who have consciously looked at storytelling, and think about how to use it, how it affects my life, how it affects how I communicate. And that's what we're talking about today, how to use storytelling. And a lot of what we'll be talking about today and later, the program that Kathrin mentioned that she got into, which is called Write Your Life Pro, of autobiographical storytelling. I'll talk to you all. I have more information about that later, which I'll get to near the end of this webinar. But that process that Kathrin was talking about is focusing on one kind of storytelling, which I think is the most important and the most essential, which is autobiographical storytelling, where we are all telling our own stories, a true story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may be fabricated, it may be embellished, which means maybe you're lying or you're embellishing it. That's okay. But it's a story about you. When you're telling a story about you, not fiction, you're not telling fiction, you're telling a story about you. Now, this we do all day long,
Yeah.
every single one of us.
Yes.
And what we'll talk about today is how and why do I tell my stories, and what do I want, and what's the impact?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it's really the personal storytelling aspect we're talking about, and how you can, why it's important for you to use it as a director, but also in all kinds of profession. Why? Because here in Germany, I have the feeling, but please, the German audience, please correct me if you think different. But I have the feeling that in Germany there's a bit of a fear to tell personal stories. We are not used to that. We don't learn that at school. We don't really do it in public. Most of us don't, and which is a pity, because in America, it seems to me that a lot of people are doing it and it's very natural. You connect with it, you motivate with it. So is that something you grew up with, storytelling, or how did you discover the power of storytelling, and how did you discover that this is something you want to be part of and you want to implement in your life?
Boy, that's another big question. Okay, this goes way back to when I was in college, and I was career-wise lost, didn't know what I was doing, but eventually I discovered theater, and so that was my entry into the world of, quote, professional or conscious storytelling. And of course, most of that was all fictional. It wasn't autobiographical, but I became fascinated with the power of storytelling and how we could impact other people, how we could not influence an audience so much, but how we could entertain, how I became fascinated with that I could create something with actors that would actually have impact on other people, would entertain them, would horrify them, whatever. That was fascinating. So once I got into that world, I was hooked into the world of storytelling. But it wasn't until many years later, back in the 1980s, and it's a long story, but a friend of mine wanted me to help him create a play, an autobiographical story. This is when I got into solo work, autobiographical storytelling on stage, a solo show, a one-man show telling his stories. And it took us about a year putting this together, but for me, it was new. Then I realized I was in a whole new world. Totally world. I'd spent many years as a director, successfully directing all over the country and sometimes over the world. But now I was in a totally new territory where the very simple concept of this one person on stage, and he is going to entertain you for the next hour and a half, or maybe even longer. And he's going to tell you a story about him, a true story. And the fact is that you realize you're watching somebody who's telling you a story and they lived through it. This is something they experienced. And suddenly the whole dynamic in the room changes. The whole relationship between performer and audience shifts and changes powerfully. And that's when I discovered the power of the autobiographical story. And since then, the late 80s, when I did that, up till now, so now we're talking, what, 20, 30 years later, still doing it, still fascinated about this.
Yeah. Oh, so I must stop you because there are so many questions popping up while you talk. So that's very interesting. That was very interesting for me. I didn't know that. So, but what do you mean? What exactly? I mean, I know it. I feel it too. But what is the difference between working as a director and then working as a director with somebody on true stories? Is that a completely different way of working, or what's the difference?
Oh, wow. That's a new question. That's a good question. No, it's a good. Okay, we're looking from the director's side, because I direct, obviously, autobiographical work, and I direct fiction. Directing true stories, directing autobiographical work is totally, totally different, because the person you as the director are working with, who is not only the performer, but is the writer and is the person who lived through this story. So the whole exploration that you're doing of this story that you're telling is contained within that one person in front of you. And you're working with that person not only to help shape the story or how the story is going to be performed, you're actually working with that person to dig down deep inside that person to discover what is the true story, the real story, and determining how much of that you want to show. So it's a very, very intimate, powerful relationship between you and the
Yes.
performer. Very different from fiction.
Do you sometimes feel like a psychotherapist or like a priest or something when you get so close to people while working with them? Or what does it feel like?
That's it's a good question. Do I feel like a therapist or a priest? I don't know what it would be like to be a priest, so I don't know what. But it's more than that. But there is a part about the therapy that I'll touch on in a second here. There is more than that. It's a very, very intimate relationship between me and that individual. So I'm more than a therapist or a priest. I'm their best friend. I'm the person that they trust. I am the person that they trust to reveal the truth of their story to the very first person. Very often, I've heard stories from a lot of these performers, writers, performers, that they have never told to anybody before, not even their therapist.
Yeah.
So I become the trusted one because I'm not trying to fix them. I'm not trying to heal them. That's not my job. I'm not trying to soothe them. In fact, if you can follow this concept a little bit in terms of therapy, because I have been accused of saying, oh, this is therapy. What you're doing is therapy. It is not what I'm doing. It's not what I'm doing.
Yes.
Because my goal is to discover what is really the truth of what's going on inside. I am not trying to change or heal the person yet. And this is really important. The process itself is therapeutic.
Yes, yes. I do believe because the way we worked and the way I work with other people, I feel that telling your own true story is such a liberating and such a healing process. I have done therapy and I have even done an analysis, but telling my story is the best thing I could ever do. I mean, that was totally because, and I think, I'm not sure if you agree with that, but because I think you take something from your life that has been maybe painful or difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and you turn it into something, into a piece of art, into something extremely beautiful. And that, I don't know why, but it seems to me that this is the best healing you can have.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and you're right, Kathrin. And that is when I say it's therapeutic. That's the therapeutic aspect of this process. The process is therapeutic. What I'm doing is not therapy, but the process.
Yeah. I just want to, because we have jumped far ahead again. I have lost completely my my program, but it doesn't matter. And can you please, because it's always so important that the people that are listening, that they know what we are talking about. Could you tell an example of how you work with one of your clients and in what way it was successful and what were the difficulties? Could you tell us an example?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to try to look at the word successful for a moment, because a lot of people can think of that word successful in many ways. One is successful in terms of career for the actor. I've worked with a lot of people that has happened. Their careers have soared. They've been very successful because this has drawn out of them something new that people have seen, and their careers have taken off. So that's that kind of success. There's also personal success when you get back to healing. When you say this is successful in terms of it changed or transformed that individual. then there's also, different kinds of success where the project has gone on to become a film or a memoir or something like that, or a novel, sort of in the case of what you're doing, Kathrin. There's that kind of success. So there's all sorts of ways this process can manifest itself, or the project you're working on can manifest itself into something, quote, successful. Although the best story I have about success, and this one I'll make quick, is a young woman, married, no children, and she worked on a one-person show for about 7 or 8 months in a workshop I was running. And then we got to a point which we did with a lot of these materials where we did a reading of it for an audience. And that was usually in the process of, now we're going to move it into a theater. Now it's going to go into rehearsal. Now it's going to become performed. And it was a beautiful show. And we did a reading. Her husband was there and a lot of her friends were there. And after she read everything she had created, the whole piece, and there's this standing ovation and people were so excited about it. And she said, "That's it. I'm done." And we all said, what do you mean? I said, "Well, yeah, but now there's the next step." She says, "No, there's no next step. I am finished. I have done everything I wanted to do. I wanted to write this. I wanted to get it out. I wanted to read it for all my friends. I'm done. I'm going to concentrate now on having children." So her success was just reading it for friends. So it all depends on your own definition of what success is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of my shows have gone on to become like films, and people's careers have taken off. A lot of people come to me hoping and actually telling me that's what they want, which I of course can't guarantee, can't guarantee it at all. But I think the biggest success for most of the people I work with is how it changes them as an artist and how they see their work and how it manifests itself in other works, like you were talking about in terms of fiction or anything else they're doing in terms of writing or directing. It has changed the way they do their work.
Yes, yes. I didn't, yeah, I mean, it's thank you for doing this really vast definition of success, because I didn't mean it just in ways of money or career or everything. So yeah, you're very right. But can you let us take part on a process, on a painful process with one of your clients where you had to dig deep and pull things out, or where it was like, maybe like riddles that you had to solve, or to find the red thread, or just the way you do it?
Well, yes, when we get to the workshop portion a little later, in about half an hour or something from now, I will at that time demonstrate how the process works.
Yeah.
So but that'll be a demonstration of the process. So you can all, I'll have a story that I'll work on, so you can see how the process works and how it can go very deep into that exploration for the truth and what is really going on. But in terms of a story, there was one person show I did many years ago called No Place Like Home. And I've always been intrigued with someone who wants to tell a story that seems frightening, totally frightening. I'm less interested in someone who says, "Oh, this is going to be fun and entertaining and all that," and it may be. But when I run into an actor or an individual or a writer who wants to tell a story that actually scares me a little bit and really scares him, and this was a story all about child abuse, how about his father almost killed him over a period of years. Now, this, I was suddenly startled, but I found myself thinking, what a horrible story. What an amazing story. I want to see it. And it's that old axiom called bad for life, good for theater. Some of the worst things that happen to people are the most fascinating stories. Now, in the construction of this solo show that I did with this actor, and we're digging deep. Now I'm digging deep into his background, his history, his experiences, and he's bringing stories to me. And out of that, we're constructing a one-man show. And there was one story that he kept starting to tell, but then stopped. He said, I can't tell you about that. No, I don't want to talk about that. And that would happen many times. And it was the story about Chipper. And eventually he did it so many times, I said to him, do you want to tell this story? He says, no. I said, do you want to tell just me? He says, he said, I'm afraid if you hear it, you'll want to put it in the show. And he's absolutely right. I probably will. And he wouldn't tell me. Eventually he told me. It's a horrifying story. It's a brutal story. About 6 months later, when the show opened here in Los Angeles, it ran for a long time, and then HBO and all that, it was the centerpiece of the show. It took, I would say, 4 months for him to get to the point where he could not only tell me the story, but delve deeper into that story and then craft it with my guidance so that it would be part of the show. And then it became the centerpiece of the show. And according to him, Shane is his name, he said it was his favorite part of the show. Now, what I discovered from that, and I've discovered with...
Tell us what was the story about. Now we need to know what the story was about.
I'm teasing you. Okay. Shane's father was brutal. This one-person show starts with this line. I was 3 years old the first time my father broke my arm. That's the first line of the show. That sort of sets the whole tone. And during the show, he talks about the abuse, alcoholic father, mean father, the father who locked him in a closet, would not allow him to sleep in his bed. He had to sleep in the closet. The house that his father had built, and it was airy, it didn't have a lot of insulation, and the wind would come through the closet, but he had to sleep in the closet. If his father came into the bedroom at night and saw him in bed, he would get angry and rip him out of bed and throw him in the closet and lock the closet door. So that's the way he was being brought up, and he was being raised. And in that closet one night, he heard a little sound. He didn't know what it was, and he looked, and a squirrel had gotten into the closet. From some crack in the house, this little squirrel had come in. And he watched the squirrel, and then the squirrel left. But then night after night, the squirrel kept coming back. And then Shane started bringing food to the squirrel. And eventually, over a period of weeks and maybe even months, he got the squirrel to eat the food, eat out of his hands, and then the relationship built to the point where the squirrel would come in and they would sleep together all night, he and the squirrel in the closet. The squirrel he called Chipper, because it made that little squirrel chipping sound. And one night his father forgot to lock the closet door. And anytime he forgets to lock the closet door, Shane would sleep in the bed, because in the closet, he didn't really have a bed. He just had a lot of things on clothes and mats on the floor. So he would sleep in the bed. And one night, the father forgot to lock the door. Shane and Chipper went into the bed, and it was beautiful. And they were there curled up warm, and Chipper's under the covers with him, and Shane is happy. One of the happiest moments of this whole show, when he's sleeping there with Chipper. But his father comes in, sees him in the bed, pulls the covers back to pull Shane out of the bed, sees the squirrel, grabs the squirrel, takes the squirrel down into the basement with Shane running after him, throws the squirrel into the burning furnace.
Wow.
That's the story, which he couldn't tell. And eventually he is telling. Now, what I've learned, which is really important, and this is getting back to what you were saying, Kathrin, stories like that are so powerful, so traumatic, that they burn themselves into our system. They eat away at us. Now we're talking PTSD and all of that. They're in there. What I've learned through this process, and not just this one story or this one play that I did, but with a lot of performers, that if there's a story that's so difficult to get to, so hard to tell, so painful to tell, if we can get to the point that we can at least start telling the story to one other person, if we can get to the point that we can maybe start writing the story down on a piece of paper, if we get to the point that we can start to look at the story and how I would like to tell this story, if we can get to the point that maybe we are actually eventually telling this story to a room full of people, there's a magical thing that happens. The power of that story that it has over that individual, the power of that story that it has over you, if any of you are thinking about such a story that you have, the power shifts. At the beginning, The story has the power. It is seared into your system, and it'll haunt you, and it'll hurt you. By the time you're telling it to an audience, you have the power. The story is the same. It has not changed at all. The emotions that are attached to the story and the feelings that are attached to this are all the same, but you have the power over the story, and that's the therapy that happens.
Yes, yes. Wow. That's very amazing. Yeah, it's that was something that I experienced while we were working together, because I told you before, I knew that shame was a big topic in my life, because I'm coming from a family where we put everything under the carpet and we don't tell it, we always pretend. And I was a girl, I always wanted to tell my truth. I wanted to carry my heart on my tongue all the time. And then they said, don't do that, don't do that. And so I learned how to pretend, and I pretended a lot. And I was never good enough, and never this and that. And at the beginning, it was so difficult to talk about things that I was ashamed of. But the more I do, it's I can laugh about them. I can say, what on earth was I thinking? What did I do? And sometimes I can even say, thank you that this happened, because I learned a lot. And and especially because I wanted to talk a little bit with you now about vulnerability, and that shame topic. I don't know if you talk a lot about this with other people, but for me, it's so important that we look at what we put under the carpet, that we have a look at what we're ashamed of, because it's holding us back, and it's not, and we can't develop, we can't grow if we are under the carpet. So what do you think about vulnerability and shame?
Well, vulnerability and shame, or even vulnerability and pride. Some people hide their pride. But vulnerability and shame, these are important. Vulnerability is really important. In order to really tell a powerful story, any kind of story, you have to be vulnerable. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. In order to write the story, even if it's fiction, you have to be vulnerable. But we're writing autobiographical pieces, so we're looking at stories in our life that, as you're saying, we feel shame about, anger with ourselves. We don't want anybody to know that this is what I did or what happened to me. I don't want anybody to know, because I can't handle them knowing it, which means I'm going to keep it inside me, which means it's going to sit in there and burn like a cancer and keep gnawing at me. But my goal in working with people is not to address the shame.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I just look at the story. I say, this is a great story. I will tell them immediately, like with Shane, like the Chipper story. I said, that's a great story. And at the beginning, he says, it's not going in the show. I said, okay, but I knew it would. Now my job is to work with him through the story. It's the two of us, and in the middle is the story. We're working through the story. And that's where I'm not trying to heal anybody. I'm not talking about the shame. I'm only talking about the story. And I'm having him. So we're using the story to have a conversation and a mutual exploration of the story. He's coming at it from the personal side of having experienced it. I'm coming from the more professional side of learning about it. And we're both pulling it apart, looking at the story, and it shifts and changes. And I know that performer, that writer, is shifting and changing because of a process, not because I'm trying to transform him or heal him.
Yeah, I know.
Any of that.
Of course, yeah. But this is just a side effect of what's happening when you work on stories. So, but we have now talked about very, very dramatical stories, and about how actors, for example, use the material for a one-man show or one-woman show, what I think is fantastic, and that's very exciting. But what can you tell even to people where their personal story isn't such a horror story or whatever? Why is it so good to look at these stories and to tell them, even in a business context, even in other in non-creative businesses?
Well, first of all, it has to do with trust. I'm assuming that whatever kind of business you're in, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor, politician, performing arts, construction worker, firefighter, whatever, that a part of your life and a part of your business, a part of your work is you would like people to trust you. I mean, there are even those politicians who keep saying that, trust me. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I never trust anybody who says, trust me. Never.
Trust me. Well, yeah, that's because they're concerned that you're not trusting them. But that's another thing.
Yeah.
This is getting back to the vulnerability again. The way to gain the trust of another human being is to trust them. And what you do is you trust them with your truth. In other words, you become vulnerable in front of them. You trust them with your truth. You trust them with your vulnerability. You trust them, as you were saying, with your shame. You start doing that, they will start to trust you. So if you're in a business where you are working in sales and marketing and all of that in that world where, quite honestly, a lot of us don't trust you, people who do that work, because we know you're just trying to sell us something. But if you are willing to expose yourself, to be personable, to be intimate, to be honest, to be authentic, we'll start trusting you. We still may not like the product you're selling. We still may not like the idea that you're trying to sell us something, but suddenly our relationship with you has changed simply because you allowed yourself to be seen. You allowed yourself to be visible. You allowed yourself to be vulnerable.
Yes, yes. I'm talking a lot with Germans about this, like with people in my workshops, because you have a lot of directors and writers, and I have a lot of people from other businesses, and we discussed this a lot because this is the biggest fear that they have, that they are vulnerable when they are showing themselves. And of course, there are always people who will not respect you, or who will laugh at you, or who will find you ridiculous when you tell your truth. But the thing is, those are the people we don't want to have near us. We want to attract people that can treat us with respect once we are ourselves. And so this is what I always try to say to them. Of course, you are more vulnerable when you speak your truth, but you will learn with whom you can do it, and you will learn that other people are coming to you that will like just the way it is. But okay, so now I really want to approach the question that that's the title for this talk. Why do you become a better storyteller by telling your own stories? And so how would you answer that question? Why, for example, is a director a better storyteller with fictional material once he has dived into his own stories and did a lot of storytelling with his personal stories?
Okay, it's a great question. The best way I can answer that is to make it very clear a very big difference between autobiographical storytelling, me telling my own story, or me telling you a story that I've made up, I've created. Big, it's a huge difference. The process is very different. When we're working with an autobiographical story, something that happened to you, and you're telling that story, a couple of things you have to recognize immediately. Number one, that story you're going to tell me, let's say it's about your 10th birthday when you were 10 years old, something happened. That story is actually already written. You don't have to make anything up. It's written because it happened and you remember it. You remember what happened, what you did, what other people did. You remember all of that. So there's a complete story there. So it's not creating fiction. On the fictional side, we create characters, events, and all that. That's what fiction is. Here, we're dealing with a real event. So the creative challenge here is not what kind of story do I want to create, is how do I tell this story? I know what the story is. In fact, you have too much information. You have way too much information. So we have to actually cut it down, narrow it down, focus it into the essential information that's there. But we're dealing with things that have already happened. How do I tell the story? Now, Also, in the center of that story, as in the center of any story, fiction or nonfiction, there is what we call a protagonist, our main character, the main character we're going to follow. Or maybe it's two characters together, it doesn't matter. But we have our protagonist. Your autobiographical story, you are the protagonist. Now you have to look at that story, and let's say it was the 10-year-old birthday. You have to look at that 10-year-old version of yourself, you at 10 years old. Now I have a big question for you as a writer, director, or whatever you are. How well do you really know that character? And truthfully, you will think you know that character very well. But then as we start exploring it, you'll probably find, oh, I really don't know that character very well because so many years have gone by and I have put a cloud around that because now this is getting back to what you said, Kathrin, about shame or whatever. I have shifted in my mind what really happened or the way I'm telling it because what I want the audience to believe or what I want myself to believe at that moment, especially if it's a difficult story, a painful story, you will try to hide it. So, but our job, our work is to really understand that character. Your work is to understand the character. That's what I can help you do, to look, and you will discover something about that character in yourself, very likely that you didn't even know was there, which was hidden, which you hid. Nobody else did it. You hid it. So that process, now by the time you have developed that story and written that story, you have gone deep into that character. You've also gone deep into the other characters. There's the mother, the father, whoever else is in this story. You've gone deep into these people who you know. Now you've explored them. Now all of this process is so valuable because once you've done that, and now you're moving on to fiction, it's not that you say, oh, I will write fiction differently. You will automatically be writing it differently just because of the experience of having done this. You will automatically go deeper into those characters. You will realize you have to know your fictional characters as well as you know your autobiographical characters. You have to know them that well.
Okay, I have many questions now. Okay, where do I start? First thing, you said at the beginning, you said, I think it was when you discovered theater and how amazed you were, and that how autobiographical storytelling is so deep and profound when people do it, that it's very hard to find that in fictional work. That is very, how can I put it? So what is, how can you do that? When you, oh no, I start again. In last year in November, I had a class of 22 actors, and I taught them storytelling and personal branding. And although they were actors, they had never done personal storytelling. And then, of course, they understood immediately what it was, and they told the most wonderful stories. And the whole atmosphere was completely intense, and it was like we were all breathing together. We were all suffering together. It was so intense, as I not very often experience that. And the thing is, how can we bring, because that's what we want as directors. We want this intensity in our films, in fictional, because the stories that the actors were telling were their own stories. So how can we bring it into the fictional work? Even, for example, you have a script that's so, okay, and but you want to make it a great script. So how can you do this intense work into a fictional story?
Okay, there is a way, and I will try to be as clear as I can. If you take, say, directors and actors working on a fictional story, totally fiction, and a writer. Let's start with the writer first. The writer writes that fictional story. The way I look at it, all of those characters that writer has created are living inside the writer. That's where they came from. Now, they may have come from research and a lot of other things, but they're all embodied inside that writer. Now, if I can get inside that writer and access that character and get that character to tell me who he or she is, now we're back into the world of autobiography. It's not the autobiographical story of the writer, but it's the autobiographical story of the character that lives inside the writer. And I can help the writer access that character that lives inside him or her. I can do the same thing with actors. So it's using the same techniques in a different way, realizing, now if you go to acting for a moment, ideally, the actor, when they're performing on camera or on stage, feel like and believe they are the character. So basically what they're doing is autobiographical. They're on an autobiographical journey.
Okay.
And so we have to use a lot of the same techniques to explore the characters that way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for an actor, I can imagine this because they have to find what's inside them to bring it into the character. But with the writing, for example, I'm now writing autobiography, and I've never felt so excited and well with anything I've written like that. But I know after that book, I would want to write fiction again. So how, and let's say I plan like something that's taking place in the medieval about the daughter of a king, and so how would I use this way, what you do in writing? How do you mean I have to bring this, I have to see what characteristics of me are in this girl, or how would I go about this?
Okay, yes. You can look at what characteristics from you are in this girl, in you, the writer, that are in the character that you're creating. And you can also look at it another way, Kathrin. You can say, you, the writer, I'm going to go back to the autobiographical. When I'm working with you, Kathrin, on an autobiographical story, you are the source of all the information, and I'm trying to pull it out and then shape it. You, the writer, on a fictional story can do the same thing with the character. Now you have to set up a relationship with the character where you are not just the creator of the character. You need to learn who this character is. You need to meet this character. Now, the character has started inside you, it started to develop inside you, but if you brought in an actress, you, because you're a director, bring in an actress, and you start working with that actress to actually discover the character, that you're writing inside that actress. Now you are meeting the actress, that character, and you are now talking with that character, and now you are working on that character's autobiographical story, even though that character was created by you in your imagination. Now it's a living human being in front of you. Now this is a long process, which I've developed, which you know about, the whole interrogation process on how to bring these characters to life. But you're doing the same thing, because you're trying to tell an honest, truthful story about these characters. Now, the hardest thing, I hope this makes sense. The hardest thing we as writers, directors, and actors have to learn how to do, and I still struggle with this, even though I realized, or I came up with all of this, we have to get out of the way. We as writers, directors, and actors have to get out of the way. Our writing gets in the way of our storytelling. Our directing gets in the way of bringing stories to life. Our desire to act gets in the way of the characters. We have to get out of the way and allow these characters and these stories to emerge on their own. It's a whole different way of approaching it. But if you're looking at it and say, okay, I've got this medieval story about this young princess and she's in love with whoever, and all, that's what it is. And if you can get to the point where you say, okay, these people actually really exist. You know they don't really, but you say, no, they do, because they are I'm bringing them to life, but I have to meet them. Then the question is, how can I meet them? How can I get to know them? And the hard part of this is giving up control.
Okay. So,
I know that's a lot. I'm throwing out a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, I'm so curious because, but what it I would just stay with this for a minute, and then I want to tell you some of the questions that I hear that are very interesting.
Okay.
What would be the first step for an actor, a director, or a writer to meet his main character? What would be, in your opinion, the first step to do this, to do so?
Okay, these are big steps, but the first step is do the autobiographical writing storytelling. So you've gone through the process of meeting your own character.
Meeting myself.
Yes, that gets back to why tell you, go through that. So you have that emotional, visceral experience within you. Then, as I mentioned, like with the interrogation process, and this is what I can teach you how to do, then you say, okay, I'm going to go through the same process through interrogation to meet my fictional characters. Now, it's ironic that I haven't even said anything about I'm going to write a story. Actually, the writing of the story, and I've talked to a lot of writers about this, the real writing, sitting down and writing the story, comes way, 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 way at the end of a long, long process.
So
by the time you're writing, you should know those characters so well as you know yourself.
So what you say, I always need examples. Otherwise, I always need stories. Otherwise, I don't understand it. So what you mean is, like, I have this idea for a long time. We have this old saga in Germany that's called Nibelungen. And there's this prince, like the daughter of a prince. And I want to tell the whole story from her perspective. So does that mean her name is Kriemhild. So does it mean I have to find Kriemhild inside of me and merge with her and see what are things that we have in common so I can tell it as truthful and as authentic as I can?
That's part of it. You also have to, and what's her name again?
Kriemhild. It's complicated. Kriemhild, yeah, well.
Okay, you have to meet this, she's a princess, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you have to meet, think about this, as you as the writer, meet the princess. In other words, just meet her alive. The princess. She does exist. Now, she exists in your imagination right now. Working with an actress, you can have her exist live and right in front of you. You can have a conversation with her. You can, through the interrogation process, you can create that character inside an actress and then let her live. And now you have actually lost control of your character, which is good.
Okay.
And now you can actually interview that character just like you're interviewing me, just to see who she is. And you'll be amazed who this person is. And now you are writing about a real person that really exists.
Okay. So that means really, is that for you, is that a spiritual process? Is it like meditation or opening up for something to come?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
that's
Yes.
great. I love it.
No, the answer is yes. And because the meditation or opening up is actually you giving over the power or letting go of the control and say, okay, whatever comes to me, yes. In other words, stop trying to control the process. We have brilliant ideas of what we want to create, but it gets to a point we have to let it go.
Yeah, great. Okay, so before it's almost an hour. So there were two questions I'd really like to tell you because I thought they were very important. There was one question somebody asked, so if I am vulnerable, if I make myself vulnerable and I'm just in the process and then somebody comes and hurts me, or how do I deal with it? What can I do to protect me or whatever? What would you tell this person?
Well, first I would have to ask that person, what do you mean? What has somebody done to you to hurt you? You made yourself vulnerable. You made yourself transparent. You made yourself visible. What did they do to hurt you? Did they abandon you, walk away from you, say they never want to see you again? Did they tell you they don't like to hear personal stories and are they annoyed? What did they do? Now think of it this way. What did they do that you allowed yourself to be hurt? It was your choice to be hurt, not theirs. They may be trying to hurt you, but it's your choice whether or not you are hurt. Or if they say something horrible to you because of what you've done, all you have to do is say, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Something horrible. You say, thank you, because I became vulnerable, and actually so did you in that moment, because you don't want to talk to me anymore. So thank you. Now we're both vulnerable.
yeah. That's wow. Thank you very much. And another question that I liked a lot, and that's I think that's something you will like to answer is when you turn an autobiographical story into a screenplay, how much do you adapt it to the dramaturgical expectations of the audience? How much do you fit it to drama structure?
Well, I think I consult on a lot of screenplays, and I think one of the great things we have is story structure, different kinds of story structure and dramaturgical expectations. And we have audience expectations. That's great, but that can also be a trap. Your job is not to cater to those expectations or those formulas. Your job is to cater to the story. What's the best way to tell the story? It may be that the way you're going to tell it does not follow audience expectation, does not follow dramaturgical structure that is expected from professionals. It's following its own path because this is what the story demands. This is what the characters demand. You need to be true to that. If you go see Roma, Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, you will see a story, a beautiful film that does not follow traditional story structure at all. And he knew it. And because of that, he wouldn't show the script to anybody before he made it. And then he wins an Academy Award and all that. But because he had to, and it's an autobiographical story. That's why I bring it up. He wanted to stay true to what had happened.
But you always one of the things that's important to you. I realize that in your work is the journey of the audience. You always say there are three journeys. That's the hero's journey, the stories, the inner journey, the outer journey, and the audience journey. So but you do take care of that. The audience is having a great journey while you're telling a story, right?
Yes. Yes, you do that. But I'm saying be careful not to cater to what you think the audience wants or their expectations. Some of the best things you can do in telling a story is to break their expectation. They think it's going one way and then it shifts and they're startled. That's good. If it's staying true to the story, if it's not just manipulative, that's good. But you could also think, like you're saying, you have to think about, where do I want the audience now? What do I want them to be thinking and feeling and fearing or whatever? What journey am I taking them? An emotional journey am I taking them on? And am I succeeding at that? Which has nothing to do with structure. It has to do with how each moment in the story is handled and how the story is told.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so good to hear again. Yeah, thank you. So one last, I mean, if you have questions right away, like that's very, very important to have it asked now, please write it in the chat. And I would like to ask you, you said something beautiful about that a life is like a forest with a lot of trees, and every tree. Can you repeat that? Because that's, I really like that image, and it makes it, hopefully it makes it clear what we are talking about.
Yeah, and this has to do a lot with any story, but especially with autobiographical stories. If you are telling a story, one simple story from your life, and because I mentioned the chipper story, let's say you're telling the chipper story. That's in Shane's story, that was just one story. As I've been working in this process, these techniques of autobiographical storytelling for years, one reaction I would get is, how come I can tell you a story and you understand what the story is about and I can't? And it's my story. I've lived it. I know it. I've lived with it. You hear it once and you understand it. Or you see or many times you see what's hidden. I will sense, or I'll sense where something's hidden. I can sense where many times the storyteller is trying not to have me see something. That can happen. And that's part of my job. That's part of my process. And for a long time, I wondered, why can I see that and this person can't? Then I realized sometimes in a group setting, the person would tell the story, other people could see the things I could see. And the storyteller couldn't. Took them a long time to see it. And this is when it made me realize that that one story, if you think of that story as a tree, it's a tree, but this is a tree that's in a forest of a lot of trees, hundreds and thousands of trees. It's a huge forest. This is just one little tree. Those other trees, if I'm working with you, Kathrin, those other trees are other stories that you have. In other words, your one story is connected with all these other stories, and these other trees influence that tree, and they are connected. Even their roots are intertwined. It's so entangled. Your life experience is very much entangled. So when you're telling that story, your perception of that story or your insights into that story are influenced by the confusion and the chaos of all the other trees. When you tell me the story, I see one tree. That's it. And so I see that one tree, and that's all I'm looking at. And so the tree becomes more visible to me, it becomes more open to me, or more vulnerable to me than maybe you want it to be, or that maybe you're capable of doing at that time because of all the other trees.
Wow. Yeah, I just love this image. And yeah, it's a very helpful image. I wanted to close it with that, but I need to ask you one more question. And also in the question and answer part, you have to answer this one question. What is the process of interrogation? But we'll do that later, I think, because that has been asked several times. But I need to ask you something now, because you were saying you sense when a story is not told completely, when there's something hidden. Why do you think does a personal story not work when there remains too much hidden?
Well, you sort of answered it, because too much is hidden. I think, again, I'm dealing with autobiographical stories now. I think when someone says, here's a story I want to tell, here's a story I want to write. And it was like the first story you and I worked on, Kathrin, when you picked that story. My assumption right at the beginning, and I'm rarely wrong about this, is there's a strong, compelling reason you picked that story. Because there's something you want to reveal that you're probably afraid to reveal. The stories exist inside us. Some stories are very adamant about wanting to be told. Some are very adamant about hiding. But that dynamic that's going on in the story between you and your story is really powerful. So if you come to me and say, I want to tell this story, I look at it, I'm going, okay, now I'm looking for, why did you pick the story? What is it you're really trying to say? Because you will probably write the story and hide the real reason you picked the story. Because I would say 60, 70% of the time, you're not aware of why you picked it. You're not aware of what's hidden in there because you buried it or trying to disguise it. My job is to help you and me find it and look at it. And then it's up to you to decide, do we want to talk about that? Do we want to talk about the anorexia? Ooh. Do we want to talk about the thing that you're coming close to, that you're not revealing? The anger, the shame, the hurt, the pride, where there's something else in there that wants to come out. And my job is to help you find it. My job working with you is to keep looking for it. And that's why if I'm just looking at the one tree, I can probably see it, and you're using the other trees to hide it.
Okay, that's a nice, I think we will end this talk with this beautiful sentence, with this last sentence. And I would like to ask, thank you very much, Mark. It was a pleasure. I could go on now for another hour or two, but I think like we said, 2 hours, so we have to move on with the program. And keep your questions for the last part, please, everybody. And now we have a 3-minute or 4-minute break, and then we move on with a mini workshop, okay?
Okay, I'd like to say one thing before the break, which gets back to what I put in my email about my offer for a free consultation. We have a little contest going on that many of you know about. It was in the second email, it wasn't in the first. But anyway, I'm offering a half-hour free consultation to one of you lovely people. One of you will win. And if you're really interested in winning this, and it's only for people who are in this broadcast, obviously, all you have to do is write into the chat, why a half-hour consultation with me would be so important to you. And the most compelling chat, well, there'll probably be a lot of compelling ones. We will select. Elsha, my beautiful wife, who's right here with me, will read through and select one of you, and we will announce the winner at the very end. So if you want to take a moment, write something in the chat, or you can write it in a little bit later if you want. But if I were you, I would do it right now as we're taking a break.
So we are just about to start the mini workshop.
Okay, we have a lot of people writing a lot of stuff in the chat. If for some reason else just not able
to see it,
we'll deal with it. No.
Hmm.
She saw it up to the point we took the break, and then it froze on her.
Oh, okay. But you know what we could do? If just in case she can't get it back, then you can read it later and then decide later and let the person know. I can send you the whole chat talk, and then you can.
Yeah, I mean, I will read it. Okay, maybe that's what we'll do, because I'd really like to read each one.
Yes.
So maybe we'll do it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Not a problem. So are we back and we're resuming?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Yep. Again, because can't see you, I just assume that all of you are there somewhere, wherever you are.
Nobody has left.
Nobody has. You sure of that? Let me just see. Okay. Yep. 94 people. That's good. Okay. So this is what I promised a little earlier, was some sort of workshop about this process. So the process of autobiographical storytelling. So we'll deal with a little story that I have here. And so I want to tell you a story first. First, I'm actually going to read it to you. I'm going to read to you the beginning of a story. That's all we're going to deal with, is the beginning of this story. So here we go. And this is autobiographical. This is my story. Okay. When I was a young boy, around 12 or so, I was picked on a lot. I was teased and bullied and ignored by both girls and boys. But the interesting thing is that I admired them in some odd way, even though they scared me. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to be included. I think I believed that if I got their approval, if they included me in their group, I would feel important. And maybe I wouldn't feel so lonely and scared. One day when I was in the schoolyard during recess, all the kids were playing and I was just standing there by myself, feeling lost and alone. I was watching the other kids hanging out together. I was imagining what it would be like to be with them, hang out with them, play with them. You know, there was this one guy, Benny McNamara, and he was the toughest, meanest bully of them all. He really scared me. And I don't know if I wanted to be like him, but I do know I wanted him to see me, to like me, to accept me. And as I was standing there, I saw Benny look at me, and he yelled out, "Hey, Curly!" And in that moment, I felt seen. I felt accepted, because Benny McNamara had given me a nickname, Curly, because of my curly hair. Okay, now that's the beginning of a story. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind in terms of storytelling, as we tell a story, to either one person or a lot of people, or even if it's written as a memoir, it doesn't matter. As we're telling the story, we are actually narrating. We are telling the audience things we want them to know. So we are narrating the story. And this, what I just read to you, I gave you a lot of information. I have to give you information because otherwise, when you realize what I read, if you saw that, say in a film, it would be me standing out there at recess, a lot of people playing, and one guy yells to me, "Hey, Curly," and that's it. That's all you got. So I have to tell you what's really going on, everything around me, the environment, what other characters are doing, and even what I'm doing and what I'm feeling. That's the narrator. So we are narrating the story. But now the key to this is really important. So hold on. There are two narrators. There are two narrators you get to work with. You, the writer, you get to choose which narrator you want to use and how you want to use it. The one I just presented to you, that's one of the narrators. That's called the omniscient narrator. Now, the omniscient narrator will tell the story to the reader or to the audience in the past tense. When I was a young boy, but the interesting thing was, and when he did, it's all in the past tense. Now that makes perfect sense because it happened a long time ago. At this time, I'm only 12 years old. So you put it in the past tense. But by putting the story in the past tense, an interesting dynamic happens. If you imagine that you have a story in your hand, here's the story. Here, right in here is your story. Okay? And now you are telling the story and you're telling it in the past tense. So you're over here telling this story. You are outside the story. Makes perfect sense because the story's already happened, as we talked about before. It's already done. There's nothing new going on. So you're telling the story in the past tense. And if you put yourself out here, this is where the audience will experience the story from this point. So if I tell the story, here I am, I'm in my 70s, and I'm telling a story about when I was 12. So you're hearing the 70-year-old perspective of Mark about when he was 12. It's disconnected. There's another reason we often put stories in the past tense is because it's safer. Not only safer for you, the storyteller, it's safer for the listener. And someone asked earlier about someone hurting them if they tell a vulnerable story. Many times people will get angry with you because you have caused them to feel something they did not want to feel. So back to this. So the audience is here experiencing the story in the past. You're telling the story in the past. You're maintaining that distance for whatever reason. Now, the other narrator is called the naive narrator. The naive narrator is also you telling the story. It's nobody else, just you. But it's you telling the story from inside the story, not over here, in here. You're in here. In other words, if I allow the 12-year-old Mark, which is me, the 12-year-old Mark to tell the story, now you have the same story told from a different perspective. This is called the naive narrator because the naive narrator does not know what is going to happen next. I'm going to go back to the omniscient narrator, which I just did. When I was a boy, a young boy around 12 or so, I was picked on a lot. I was teased. I was bullied. I was ignored by both boys and girls. Now that's the past tense. You, every single one of you, automatically know that I know how the story is going to end. I know the whole story because I put it in the past tense. I'm not of that time. I'm after that time. Not only do I know that entire story and how it's going to turn out, I know everything that's happened since that story up until now. I'm not naive at all. But if I tell the story from the naive narrator does not know how the story is going to end or even what's going to happen in the next few moments. So I'm going to read you the same story again. this time from the naive narrator. It's the exact same event. Nothing has changed. It's recess. I'm 12 years old. Somehow I made it to the 5th grade. I'm outside again. I'm staring at the yard, the schoolyard full of students, laughing, playing, teasing. They're happy. I don't want to move, but I don't want to be alone. I know I'm supposed to mingle, as my mom says. I'm supposed to find friends, as my dad says. So I'm looking, I'm watching. I need to find someone to play with, to talk with, to be with, so that I can tell my mom that I mingled. I don't want to be alone. I shouldn't be alone. I'm not good at being alone. Well, actually, that's not true. I want to be alone. If I stay alone, no one will talk to me, which is really good, because I know that anything I say could be really stupid. I know that I'm not smart, not like the rest of them. You have to learn to think for yourself, Mark. That's my dad. Hey, Curly! I know that voice. That's Benny McNamara. No one else sounds like Benny. It's all gravelly and raspy from so many cigarettes. I wish I liked cigarettes, because then I could, hey, Curly! And I look at Benny, and he's looking right at me. Right at me. And now he's walking towards me. And he keeps yelling, hey, Curly! Wow. Curly must be my new nickname. That's nice. I like it. Benny's got his guys with him, Elmo, Hopalong, and Decker. Hey, I'm making friends, Dad. Hey, girlie, nice legs. Oh, shit. Oh, shit, it's not Curly. It's Girly. Oh, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. I want to cry. No, don't cry. Don't cry. No crying. Please don't cry. Don't let them see you crying. I gotta pee. I gotta pee. No, I can't pee. I gotta pee. Hey, looks like Girly wants to be a girly. Now Benny is standing right in front of me, his cigarette hanging from his lips. Hopalong and Elmo are leaning on his shoulders, leering at me. Decker is drifting around behind me, mumbling to himself. Benny takes a cigarette and he flicks it straight at me. Bounces off my chest. Don't cry. Don't cry. Please don't cry. No crying. Don't let them see you crying. Mingle, Mark. Make friends, Mark. Tears burn at the edges of my eyes. I don't move. I wet my pants. Okay. Now, same story, different beginning. So I would like you to, if you like to, into the chat, what was the difference? Now, before you write anything about what is the difference, I'm not asking you to analyze what I did. I want to know what was the difference that happened inside you. You heard the same story twice. The first time you had a reaction, whatever it was. The second time you had another reaction, probably different. What was the difference in how you felt, or your interest level, your curiosity, anything? Because that is all that matters. When storytelling, what matters is what's going on inside the listener, not so much what I'm doing. And we can analyze that, we can talk about that, but that's all intended to trigger an emotional journey inside you. So I'd like you to write in the chat, which I'll look at later, what was the difference? And even you doing that now, that is a big part of the process. Learning how to listen, learning to be aware of how you're listening to a story shifts and changes depending on how the story is told. This is how you get to learn a lot about storytelling when you're the listener to a story and how it's impacting you. And when the story is told this way, I feel that way. When it's told this way, I feel that way. And this will help guide you in your own storytelling. So what I just did for you, I gave you the two narrators. Now, there's another aspect of the story which is really, really important. And there are a lot of aspects. Besides the two narrators, the question is, what does the character want? Now, we take the little 12-year-old Mark in this story. What do I want? What do I need? What do I fear? What's in the way? What's in the way of me getting what I want? What am I risking by doing what I'm doing? What are my expectations? What do I think is going to happen? Now, if you realize, telling in the past, if I told you I was standing out there and I was really afraid and I just wanted friends, and you go, fine. But it's very different when you hear the 12-year-old going, I'm out here, I feel all alone, I wish I had somebody to talk to. It's the same want, it's the same need, it's the same desire. But when it comes from the naive little boy, the naive character, and it doesn't have to be a little boy, it could be a story you're telling that happened yesterday. But when we're hearing it in the present tense, with you keeping us in that moment, on that journey with you, riding emotionally with you through the story. Ironically, and this is the beauty of you, the listener, and of the audience, ironically, you believe that that 12-year-old that you're hearing does not know how the story is going to end, does not know what's going to happen next. That's the suspension of disbelief, because you're smart enough to know that there's Mark Travis, 70 whatever years old, telling this. Of course he knows what he's doing. Of course he knows how it's ending. But I put you in a position of not knowing because I put my character, my main character, in the position of not knowing. And that is where you want to be. You go to see a film. You want to be taken on a journey of not knowing what's going to happen next. So you go on that emotional ride. That's a film or a novel or any story. You want to be in that position because that's the richest, most important place to be. You know the novel's finished. You have the whole thing. You like not knowing how it's going to turn out, even though you know the writer finished it. It's a wonderful thing that we all do. And one more point about this storytelling. The events, hold on to this idea, the events of your story are not the story. Now, I started a story for you, and I told you about me and Benny McNamara, a couple of other characters. I told you about the cigarette flicking hitting my chest, other things that happen. Those events are not the story. I even told you about what my mother says to me, what my father says to me. You get an image of all of that. Those events are not the story. What happens on that schoolyard is not the story. The story that we're going for is what happens inside you, what happens inside me. Me at 12 years old. What am I thinking? What am I fearing? What am I feeling? What are the dreads that are going? What are the expectations? What are my plans? What are my ideas? What are my thoughts about the fact that I think I'm going to cry or wet my pants? That's the story. The story rides inside the protagonist, the real story. Now, this even gets back to what Kathrin was talking about earlier. What's the link between autobiographical storytelling and fiction? It's the same thing in fiction. If you can't ride inside the hopes and aspirations, dreams, fears, desires of the protagonist, you will not enjoy the film. You will not get involved in the film. You go to see a film or read a book, you want to get lost in it. The most beautiful experience with it, let's say reading a book or seeing a movie or seeing a play, is afterwards to realize, wow, I was gone for 2 hours or whatever the time was. I was inside that. Everything else went away. That's what we want. That's what your job as a storyteller is to do, is to help facilitate that. So the naive narrator is the one that can make that happen, because the naive narrator can tell the listener exactly what's going on. I can tell you what I'm thinking, what I'm fearing, what I'm dreading. I can tell you all of that. I can tell you things that in that moment, as that 12-year-old boy, I would tell nobody. But in the storytelling, I'm going to tell you so that you can ride with me on my journey through this horrendous event. Now, this story is much longer. I don't have time to read all of it to you. And it's kind of interesting how it turns out. And someday later, you may get to hear it. But this is the beginning of the process. Also, one last thing, one last little lesson, which has not everything to do with every story, not just autobiographical. There's a term called the gap, G-A-P, not the store, the gap. The gap is the difference between a character's expectation and what really happens. What's my expectation? My expectation at that moment when I hear Curly is I've been included in that group of guys. They are going to, that's the expectation. You can sort of feel it like, wow, this is great. I got to have a nickname. That's an expectation. The result is totally different. That gap between expectation and result is powerful storytelling. Whether it's fiction, autobiographical or not, you have to be aware of that, and you have to sometimes manipulate the gap, manipulate it so the gap works, because the one thing we all share as human beings is the experience of things not working out the way we hope or believe they should. Really, everything. For instance, a lot of you came to this broadcast that Kathrin put together and all that, and you all came with expectations. Some of you know me, probably most of you don't. So, but you had, regardless, you had expectations. Those of you who know me had expectations. My guess is it has not turned out the way you thought it would. Now, I don't mean it's not working. I don't mean it's bad. It's just different. And this is what we experience every day of our lives, that gap. It turns out different. And one of your jobs as a storyteller is to understand how that works. But if you don't put in the expectation in your story, and you only give us the events that happened, we only get half the story. If you say, I was here and this happened, that happened, isn't that fascinating? I go, well, maybe. But if you say, I was here and then I was hoping for this and I was trying to do this and I knew this was going to work and then this happened, now we go, now we have a story. So there's another technique, which is we use all the time. And I can see what it's a good time to stop and get into Q&A, I think, Kathrin. Are we around that time?
Yes, yeah, right. Yeah, I was so caught up in reading the chats. You will just love it when I send it to you. Yes. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was one more little thing I want to add, because I totally forgot. I was too wrapped up in the moment. My expectation is I wouldn't forget to do anything. Lots of luck.
Yeah.
But I was going to say just one thing about the two narrators. You can go back and forth between the two narrators as you're telling the story. In other words, you can go inside the story and then you can go outside the story and then back in and then out and back in. And that's a powerful dynamic when I can shift from the perspective and point of view and experience of the 12-year-old and then go to the adult outside the story and back. And I'll give you a for instance, which I have here right here for you. The story ended where I stopped with, the cigarette bounces off my chest. I say, don't cry, please don't cry. Don't let them see you crying. Mingle, Mark, make friends, Mark. Tears burn at the edge of my eyes. I don't move. I wet my pants. Now that's all the naive narrator. I don't move. I wet my pants. Then you can shift to the omniscient narrator like this. I don't move. I wet my pants. You know, when I was 12 years old, I was still wetting my bed. Nobody could figure out why or how to get me to stop. They tried a multitude of techniques and nothing worked. So I became really good at hiding it, covering it up. But in a moment like that, with Benny, I couldn't hide it. Now that's the omniscient narrator, stepping outside. Now what I've done is I've given you more information about that 12-year-old that the 12-year-old has no reason to reveal to you at that time at all. So I could step outside, I put another framework around the story, and then I can go back into the naive narrator again. So this moving back and forth between the two narrators, this is something we work on and play with to try to discover the most powerful way to tell the story. Okay, now I'm going to stop.
Okay. Before we thank you very much, Mark. It was very impressive.
You're welcome.
I really liked it. I wish we had time for the exercise, but I think we stick to the 2 hours. And I think there are a lot of questions coming now. Before we go into that, I just wanted to say something, because the way this talk today started is because I have these talks every Thursday with storytellers on Instagram. And my vision is it, because as you can see, I believe so much in the power and the healing power and the beauty of storytelling. I want to build a community of storytellers, and because I think the world is going to be a better place if we all learn how to tell our stories the best way we can. And if you want to, you can join me on Instagram Live every Thursday for the talks. I will have a very fascinating American author and a great storyteller from Singapore. And this is how I invited Mark, and I hope I will have him again. But this talk was so fantastic that I thought I want to make something bigger of this. Okay, so now I would like to ask you to ask all the questions that you still have. Maybe you can start with the interrogation process, because this Nastasia, she asked that several times. What about the interrogation process? What is it?
Well, it's huge. I'll give you. I want to say a couple of things, and thank you for asking the question. A couple of things first. One is the contest. I've looked at some of the responses which you put in about wanting the half hour, and some of yours will take a half an hour to read. They're very long. And to really honor and respect all of you who have written, because I can get a copy of this chat. Is that right, Kathrin?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to try to pick someone today. It was two. Elsa and I looked at it, and we're thrilled. We're thrilled with your responses. We're thrilled that so many of you poured your hearts out into what you want, and you can write some more if you want. And we will. What Elsa and I will do is, after this is over, we will print it all out, and then we will pick the winner, and we will let you know, because I believe we have your email address and all of that. Second or third thing. Second thing. I'm going to go off camera right here. I'm going to go to this. If you want to, this is how you can get in touch with me. Just if I was you, I would just take a screenshot of that or just write it down. This is how you can get in touch with me if you need to about anything. And as I continue to talk, I am coming back to the interrogation question. Okay, I'm going to go to something else just for a second here. This is the course that, or the process that Kathrin and I talked about at the beginning, Write Your Life Pro. I'm going to leave that there for a moment so you can all see it. Take a screenshot of that. And if you're interested in that process, which Kathrin talked about, which has led her to her novel now and everything, and The Lovely Shame, which I think is a great title. I love it. If you want to know more about that, write to me. That's why I gave you the email address. I'll put that back up again. Just write to me and say, I really want more information about Write Your Life Pro. I will send it to you. This is not, just to be very clear, Write Your Life Pro is not a workshop. It's a one-on-one process, which I work with you individually through the whole process of working on your material. It's based on Write Your Life Inside Out, which maybe some of you took, and it's, as it's listed here, it's got 9 hours of lecture. It's got 4 hours of consultation with me and a lot of feedback. So anyway, that's it. Let's look at that. So now I want to get back to the question about the interrogation. The interrogation process, I will explain it simply. It's a very, very big subject matter, and I would love to do an entire talk someday, maybe with Kathrin on this, just about that. It would take at least many hours. But think of it this way, working with an actor.
Take the picture off.
What's that?
Yeah, we want to see you.
Oh, you want to see me?
Yes, if it's possible, I think we'd like to see you.
No, I've left. I'm not in the room anymore.
You will have all the addresses anyway, and you can send an email again with everything,
Yeah, okay, good. So The interrogation process, think of it this way. This is something I discovered and developed many, many years ago working with actors. The whole process of directing actors, which is a process of telling actors what to do, how to play it, what emotions you want, all of that. That's traditional directing. And I know a lot of directors who are with the Directors Guild and in Germany are online. Maybe a lot of you have been at the master classes I did at the BVR in the years past, where I demonstrated this. Directing actors is a process of trying to control and design what you want. My process, which is the interrogation process, where I do not direct the actor at all. I'm only in conversation with the character. And through an interrogation process, I reveal and build the character inside the actor, and it comes out. The actor basically has to do almost nothing. And so by interrogating the character, questioning the character, what I'm doing is building the mind and the experience of the character inside the character. So the character is actually literally coming out of the actor without the actor trying to control it and without the actor trying to build it. When I cast something I'm directing, or whether it's a play or film, I tell the actors, you don't have to create the character. We just have to release it. I show them the process and they are thrilled because they can suddenly feel the character. The character does exist. It's the only way that I know of to get to totally authentic characters who are authentic to themselves and who are not under the control of the writer, the director, or the actor. So that's the interrogation process, really in a nutshell. When I mentioned it earlier, I can do this, and another time I could show you how to do this. I can interrogate a writer, not an actor, about the characters that writer is creating. But I'm talking to that character that's inside the writer, and then allow that character to come out of the writer and allow the writer to meet the character that they have been developing inside themselves, but to meet the character without trying to control it, without trying to manipulate it. It's a very, very powerful process. I've done a lot of workshops on it. If you're interested in the interrogation process, you can write to me about that too. I'll send you more links and information where you can learn a little bit more about it, and even get involved in some of the workshops we do where we develop these skills.
Okay, so Nastya asked, so is it asking a lot of questions, the interrogation process?
See, now you want to do that. Is it asking a lot of questions? Yes, but it's not just asking a lot of questions, it's how you ask the questions, how you actually stimulate the character to come alive through the questions. I'm going to explain one more thing. Our brains work in an interesting way. Short-term memory. By short-term memory, I'm talking about my memory right now, your memory, what you're holding on to in your mind right now, not the past day or hour or even minutes, right now. And you can hold about 8 pieces of information in your head at any one time. And those pieces of information will have to do with listening to me, this workshop, and whatever you're thinking. Now, an actor working on a character will have about 8 pieces of information going on at one time. But if I start interrogating that actor as the character, I can slowly replace almost all of those 8 things with 6 things or more that are about the character, not about the actor. I can overload the mind of the actor, so all they're doing is thinking as the character, because that has taken over. It is a sort of soft, subtle form of hypnosis. Yes, it is all done through questions. It's not done by forcing something in. It's done by questioning, Socratic questioning, where the character has to respond. One thing in there is, if I ask the actor what she thinks of the character, I'll get one point of view. If I ask the character what she thinks of herself, I'll get another point of view. That's the one I want. I don't want the one that is the actor's point of view. So it's a process of building and stimulating and igniting the mind of the character.
Yeah, that makes me thinking that when I ask people, tell me your story or tell me about yourself, they always explain so much about themselves. And the first thing I have to tell them is, don't explain it. tell it. That's what you mean, right? And that's the difference between the first and the second story. In the first, you were explaining a bit, or you were showing the character and giving information. And the second is we just feel it. We are just inside his shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So now everybody, it's your turn to ask questions, or because nobody's asking questions right now. I could go back at the beginning. There were a lot of questions.
I have to leave this up to you.
Yeah. So I just go, or no, you tell me.
I want to thank Sandra Nuttall for what she just wrote. She says, I've worked with Mark in a workshop in this way, acting from there feels fantastic, much more free and deep without working so hard for it. Can highly recommend it, dear directors here. Thank you, Sandra. It's nice to see you.
Yes.
I don't see you, but I know you're there.
She watched the talk on Instagram too, and she really liked it.
Oh, good.
So here are
good.
questions. My question from Lani is, do you have any specific advice on how to boost one's self-confidence?
Self-confidence in what?
In writing?
Writing, acting, directing, life, being a mother, being a father, being what?
Probably in all areas, I think. It always takes some.
Okay, here's a question.
My true self, in being my true self.
Being your true self. Okay, Lonnie, I'm going to ask you a question which you don't have to answer in the chat, but think about that. Let's assume it's in terms of storytelling and autobiographical storytelling. And I would ask you, Lonnie, in terms of telling stories, what would you write about? What story would you tell if you had no fear? If you think about that, now to all of you out there, all 90 of you out there, if you think about, all of you have stories that you say, I'm not going to tell, I can't. We fear our own stories. We fear this telling of our own stories. Now, one way to build self-confidence, Lonnie, is to tell those stories. Tell them. When you realize the thing you were afraid of, you didn't need to be afraid of. And once, as I told you before about the chipper story, the power shift, and you realize, wait a minute, I can deal with those things that pull my self-confidence down in such a way that suddenly my self-confidence is going up. I say, wait a minute, I'm good. I am powerful. I am courageous because I can tell the most horrible, shameful, embarrassing stories in such a way that it's a delight to tell. It's a delight to hear it. And it makes me happy. You can do that. Mm-hmm. It takes work. But the first thing is it takes the willingness to face the fear and go, okay, if people know this about me, it's going to destroy all my relationships. And my first reaction to you would be, great, good. Not that you're going to destroy the relationship, but great that the fear is that deep. And you're probably going to discover in the process of telling that story that that fear was not true at all.
There's thank you, Mark. That was a beautiful answer. So here's another interesting question. There is so many different ways in telling a story. How do you know which one is the best? Is there one truth?
It's trial and error. The best way to tell the story. This is why we do rewrites after rewrites after rewrites. And Kathrin can tell you about that with her stories. Look at it again, try it another way. The other thing is the best way to tell the story. A lot of it is testing the story on people. Just read the story and see what kind of response, see what kind of journey they go on, see what the story is actually doing to them and say, is that what I want? You know, are they disconnecting? Are they bored? Are they frightened? Are they laughing? In other words, test your story, knowing I can rewrite it. I can tell it a different way. And it's sometimes, like with a lot of my stories, it's not a matter of rewriting. I just keep telling it. I'll do it verbal. I'll do a story like the one I was reading to you, the Curly story. Many times, just tell it. I'll tell it again and again. Just improvise it. But I'm really focusing on how it feels to me and how it's feeling to the audience and how they are responding emotionally to the story. Trial and error. There's no formula.
There's another interesting question. Isn't storytelling also self-fulfilling prophecy?
A self-fulfilling prophecy of what? Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? It was prophesied that what's going to happen? That you're going to be a storyteller? I don't understand.
I think the person probably means it as, if I tell a story this way, doesn't it mean that it will happen this way then?
Or you're telling a story about something in the
I hear
future?
of how you tell yourself your own story.
Well, okay, now that's something different. What you tell yourself about your stories. And if you have a story that, like Kathrin was talking about, of a lot of shame, what you tell yourself about that story, is that a self-fulfilling prophecy? In a way it is. If you say, that's the most horrible thing that's ever happened in the world and I'm so ashamed. Well, if you keep saying that, then that's exactly how you see it. But if you look at that story and say, this is an amazing story. It's really horrifying and frightening, but I'm really proud of myself that I have this story and I know what I'm going to do with it. Now you've framed it. You haven't changed the story, but now it's what you're telling yourself about the story. Then you can change how you feel about the story, and then your experience of telling the story will change. But the story itself does not change.
Here's another question. I think we can take 2 more questions. So what is the difference between telling a story too private or professional? Meaning transforming the story to a creative story. Can you tell a story too private?
Well, the too private, I know I keep doing the same thing. As soon as you say that, I have questions for you. When you say too private for who? Do you think it's too private for you and you shouldn't be telling it? Then that's the story you're telling yourself. You're saying you shouldn't tell it. Do you think it's too private for the people you're telling it to? You think they don't want to hear it? Or do you think that they're going to judge you because of it, and so you label it as too private and you don't tell it? So I'm not sure what too private is. I do know what too graphic is, or something like that, where it's so horrifying, that's so graphic that it disturbs the story. But I would experiment with the story you think is too private. Try writing it. Don't tell it to anybody. Just try writing it. See what happens to you. And then maybe sometime later, try reading it to somebody or sharing it with. Again, it's a trial and error thing, so you can test the waters of that story and what your experience is.
I get asked that question a lot. When is my story personal and when is it private? And because I think a lot of people that ask me, they feel we all know these people in TV shows that tell these really things that we don't want to know, and we are ashamed for them to tell things that where they feel that they are completely victims and they don't see that they can change something about this. And so I don't know if what do you think about this? I always say, well, you can be as personal as you want, as long as you own your story. But when you're too private, then it means you haven't really recovered from it. You're still torn between a lot of things, and it's very, very difficult to tell it then.
Okay, this is really important what you're talking about now, and it gets back to you're talking about celebrities or people telling stories that we don't want to hear. My first question is, as you listen to that story, why do you think that person is telling the story? A lot of stories we don't want to hear because we don't like the reason it's being told. If the reason is, if you're telling a story to someone and your reason, your intention is to get pity or sympathy, or support or something, in other words, you want something for you, then we will say, I don't want to hear this. You will blame the story. That's fine. But when you look at it, you're really blaming the storyteller for using a story for their own selfish purposes. One thing is really important. On all the one-person shows that I've developed and directed, and I've done 30, 40 of them, something like that, one problem comes up, one challenge comes up. you have a person on stage telling their story. Why are they doing that? The more personal it becomes, the more you're getting close to what seems like, as you mentioned, Kathrin, therapy. Is this therapy for the storyteller? If we feel like it's therapy for the storyteller, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear that story. So it's a mindset of the storyteller. And the way I work with everybody I work with is, you're going to get on stage. Think about it. If you get on stage or in front of a lot of people and tell a story, there is actually no good reason for you to tell a story. You don't need to tell the story for you. You know the story. So it can't be for you. It cannot be for you. And if there was nobody there in the audience, you wouldn't tell the story. You would say, I'm standing here by myself. Why should I tell the story? But if there was somebody listening, one person or a group of people, you're telling the story because of them. Your story, and you have to make this really clear in your head, your story is a gift. It's a gift to them. You are giving them a gift from you. You are asking for nothing in return. You're not asking for adulation, praise, sympathy, pity, nothing. Now, those things may come along with it a little bit, but that's not your reason. And the thing is, the audience and you who asked the question and the rest of you out there, you know, you can feel it immediately why that person is telling that story. You can feel it. You know it. You can see that tree. You know what's going on. And as soon as you feel that they're doing it for some self-serving purpose, you immediately don't like them or the story. You just turn off. But if you feel like that person is sharing an experience they had with you as a gift to you, that it can be of value to you, you will like the person and you will like the story.
Wow. Mark, this last sentence was so powerful. I would really want to end the question and answer here, because this is one of the, in my view, it's one of the most important sentence about, one of the most important remarks about storytelling, that your story must be a gift to the audience. And that I really want that to stick in people's minds. And I would say let's leave it, because we said we would like to leave in time. So it's either we do another talk sometime, or you just write all your questions to Mark. I don't know. What do you say, Mark?
What do what at another time? Another one of these. We can always do another one of another talk like this. I want, first of all, I want to thank you, Kathrin, for putting this all together. And I've enjoyed being here. I mean, I love my work. I enjoy doing my work. I enjoy talking about it. And I thank you for a wonderful interview and an opportunity to share all of this. And to all 87 now of you there, that's a lot. Nice to meet you all, and I hope to hear from you, even if you just want to be on our mailing list and all that. And Kathrin and everybody, if we think there's a time and a reason to do another one of these on a different topic, we could do that too. We could, the same kind of, whether it's on the interrogation process or any other aspect of the work I do. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. It would be just so nice if you stay in touch with us, and the easiest would be to that we are connected on Instagram or on LinkedIn or Facebook, so that we know what you want, and then we can give it to you.
Yep.
And and Mark, as you know, I always enjoy so much talking to you, and it was such a pleasure to do this here now for a bigger audience. And very many people say thank you, and I think that's the nicest gift for me for tonight. And do you want to say something more about your workshops, or is there anything left to say?
I don't think so. I mean, I put that one Write Your Life Pro up there. If anybody wants to know about that, all you have to do is write to me. You have my email address, and I will connect you. I'll give you information. I'll write back to you. I will. I write back to everybody. There are a lot of other workshops, the interrogation workshops. They're all, if you want to know more, just let me know. We'll put you on our mailing list so you'll get the newsletters and all that, and we'll keep you informed of what we're doing.
Okay, okay. So, and one last thing maybe from me, because I'm doing a beautiful newsletter every month about tips and tricks and tools about storytelling. And also people can put their stories in my newsletter if they want. So if you want to stay in touch with me, that would be the easiest. You can enroll for my newsletter. And yeah, we will write you a message anyway, like an email, and then I put everything inside it again. And yeah, Mark, you were saying to me, maybe we can do something, you know, not permanent, but something more often. And as I say, it's such a big vision of mine to put all the storytellers of the world together, and hopefully when this pandemic is over, to bring them all into a big house or into a big room. And because for me the most beautiful thing in the world is to tell stories and to listen to stories. There's nothing like that, and I cannot imagine anything more beautiful than a whole congress hall full of storytellers who go together for dinner and talk about things, and that would be so fantastic. If you'd like that too, let me know, and we will plan something for the future in my newsletter. Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. I look forward to the day that we can all do all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So have a beautiful evening. Thank you that you were all staying with us. And I hope I see you soon or talk to you soon, and talk to you hopefully next week, Mark. Yeah. Bye-bye.
And I thank you all. Thank you all for being there. And I look forward to hearing from you and maybe seeing some of you in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Mark.
Bye.